It will be a wonderful thing for productivity, that's true. Whether it be a wonderful thing for society is something else altogether. In a decent society, if you increase productivity a lot, everybody's better off. But here what's going to happen, if you increase productivity a lot, the rich and the big companies are going to get much richer, and ordinary people are probably going to be worse off because they'll lose their jobs. Many people say, you know, it'll create more jobs. For this particular thing, I'm not convinced of that. What we're doing in the Industrial Revolution, we made human strength irrelevant. Now we're making human intelligence irrelevant. And that's very scary. So there's some areas where demand is very elastic. An example would be healthcare. If I could get 10 hours a week talking to my doctor, I'm over 70, I'd be very happy. So if you take someone and make them much more efficient by having them work with a very intelligent AI, they're not going to become unemployed. It's not that you're now only going to need a few of them. You're just going to get much more healthcare. Great. So in elastic areas, it's great. There's some areas that are less elastic, like I have a niece who answers letters of complaint to a health service. She used to take 25 minutes to answer a letter. Now she can just scan the letter into ChatGPT. It'll give an answer. She'll look at it, check it's okay. That's 5 minutes now. I suspect they'll need less people like that. It may be they can just, everybody can complain a lot more, but I suspect they'll need less people like that. So some jobs are elastic, others aren't. The non-elastic ones, I think people will lose their jobs. And what's going to happen is the extra wealth created by the increase in productivity is not going to go to them. For a long time, people have realized there's going to be an arms race. Who can get the best lethal autonomous weapons fastest? All of the defense departments of the people who sell arms, like the US, China, Britain, Israel, Russia, all those defense departments are busy working on autonomous lethal weapons. They're not going to stop. If one of them stopped, the others wouldn't. What we need for that is not to stop working on it, but to have a Geneva Convention. Now, you don't get Geneva Conventions, things like the Geneva Conventions for chemical weapons, until after something very nasty has happened. So I think realistically, very nasty things are going to happen with lethal autonomous weapons, and then maybe we'll be able to get conventions. So for chemical weapons, the conventions have basically worked. Putin isn't using them in the Ukraine, and they haven't been used much. Basically, the conventions worked. I'm hoping they would work for lethal autonomous weapons, although I'm less confident. But nothing's going to happen until after some very nasty things have happened. As soon as we make agents, which people are busy doing now, things that can act in the world, to make an effective agent, you have to give it the ability to create sub-goals. So if you want to get to Europe, you have a sub-goal of getting to an airport. And you don't have to sort of think about Europe while you're solving that sub-goal. That's why sub-goals are helpful. And these big AI systems create sub-goals. Now, the problem with that is, if you give something the ability to create sub-goals, it will quickly realize there's one particular sub-goal that's almost always useful. So if I have the goal of just getting more control over the world, that will help me achieve everything I want to achieve. So these things will realize that very quickly. Even if they've got no self-interest, they'll understand that if I get more control, I'm going to be better at doing what they want me to do. And so they will try and get more control. That's the beginning of a very slippery slope.
But that suggests time's a wasting. That in fact we don't have that much time.
We don't.
To be able to get some control over generative AI.
We control it right now, but we don't have that much time to figure out how we're going to stay in control when it's smarter than us.
How do we go about that? Let's take the United States, for example, but before we go globally, the United States. We have a government, there are good people in the government, smart people, some probably less smart. But are they up to the job of really understanding what you're talking about and getting their arms around it?
I think with the current government, they are taking it seriously. It's just very difficult to know what to do. One clear thing they should be doing, that I believe they should be doing, we need many of the smartest young researchers to be working on this problem, and we need them to have resources. Now, the government doesn't have the resources, the big companies have the resources. The government, I think, should be insisting that the big companies spend much more of their resources on safety, on this safety research of how will we stay in control, compared with what they do now. Right now they spend like a few percent on that, and nearly all their resources go into building even better, bigger models.
As you say, big companies don't like to be told by the government how to spend their money, but they are often. I mean, you have big accounting departments, for example, to comply with various regulatory requirements on accounting. If the government were to say, yes, we're going to, at least for the very largest tech firms involved in AI, mandate a percentage of your revenue that will be devoted towards safety, what's the right number?
I'm not sure that's the right thing to go for. It shouldn't be a percentage of the revenue, because that's very complicated, and they put all the revenue in some other country and cheat. The thing to go for is a fraction of their computing resources. The bottleneck here is computing resources. How many NVIDIA chips or how many Google Tensor chips can you get? It should be a fraction of the computing resources. That's an easier thing to measure.
What fraction?
I think it would be perfectly reasonable to say a third. Now that's my starting point, and I'd settle for a quarter.
From everything you know, everything you understand, is generative AI potentially an existential threat to the human species?
I think that's what I've been saying, yes. It really is an existential threat. Some people say this is just science fiction, and until fairly recently I believed it was a long way off. I always thought it would be a very long-term threat, but I thought it would be 100 years before we had really smart things. 50 years maybe. We had plenty of time to think about it. Now I think it's quite likely that sometime in the next 20 years, these things will get smarter than us, and we really need to worry about what happens then.